against Bitcoin.
It's going up forever.
You're against Bitcoin, you're against freedom.
Yo, welcome to another episode of Simply Bitcoin Live, your number one source for the peaceful Bitcoin revolution, covering news, culture, matic warfare. We will be your guide through the separation of money and state. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Simply Bitcoin, the most watched daily Bitcoin live show on YouTube, Rumble, and X. Well, kind of an interesting weekend, and the reason I'm saying that, first of all, holy cow, the halving live stream was insane. I can't believe I got to be a part of that. So shout out to our friends over at BMag. That was interesting. On Friday, we're in the fifth epoch. This is the first Simply Bitcoin show of the fifth epoch. I think things are going to get wild from here. This is the supply shock, all the things that are coming with it. But today we want to talk about specifically the clown world, and clown world is accelerating. Fiat world is accelerating. And there was this interesting post that was going viral all over Twitter, and it came out that post wasn't real, but it was so real. And it was basically a letter to President Biden, and Elizabeth Warren was asking President Biden to have a 1% wealth tax on Bitcoin, and every single transaction, or basically if anyone had over $1,000 worth of quote unquote Bitcoin, they would have to report it to the IRS. Now, the reason that it went so viral is because it was so believable, number one. And number two, a lot of people are going to be saying, I know it, like, why are we going to talk about it, if it's not believable? Well, I think it's kind of like a foreshadowing of what's to come in the next 5 to 10 years as governments continue to lose the ability to create money for free that everyone else has to work for, as more and more people choose to opt out of that system, as the system continues to degrade, not because of the people's actions, the citizens' actions, but because of their own actions. Now, I do want to talk about a video that was real, and it was a video of the $60 billion funding bill being passed in the House, and it's going to be passed in the Senate. It's going to be signed into law. They're sending another $60 billion to Ukraine. Now, what was really interesting about that bill was that literally politicians were cheering and they were waving a Ukrainian flag in the US Senate. And if you think about what that represents, you have the people that supposedly represent you, or they're supposed to represent you in Washington. They're cheering on sending $60 billion to a foreign country, funding another forever war, another foreign war, while everyday Americans are still feeling the ravages of inflation, which are caused by the money printing, which they have to do in order to pay for the deficit spending, because the US government is spending more money than it collects in tax revenue year after year. And the way that they're able to pay for that is through printing the difference. And here you have politicians once again agreeing to pay for something that we cannot afford. And then I'm going to connect that with what the F happened in 1971, the fact that productivity has gone through the roof, but compensation has really stayed the same. Now, what was really interesting in this quote unquote supposed letter to the president by Elizabeth Warren is that she mentions inequality. And that's something that's a talking point that you hear all the time, that there's this crazy inequality and we need government wealth redistribution in order to fix that crazy wealth inequality. You know what the main catalyst of wealth inequality is? Printing money, because it's the lower and middle classes that don't have the means to save in assets. Therefore, they don't benefit from asset inflation every time Jerome Powell presses the P button. And it's a wealth redistribution back to the government and back to the very wealthy that do have the means to save in assets. So every time they go on a money printing binge, their assets go up. And it's not necessarily because the price of, or the purchasing power or the actual value of those assets going up. It's just it's a representation of how much money they're printing, right? So the poor are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer, not because of capitalism, but because they're printing an excessive amount of money. So that's what I want to cover today, because I think that this letter, the supposed letter that some people are saying is not real. I think it's a foreshadowing of what's to come the next 5 to 10 years. I think we already saw this in, I believe it was Nigeria, where they started blaming Binance for people choosing to opt out of the local fiat currency, the Naira. And they were literally putting out arrest warrants for executives of Binance. Instead of them being like, okay, guys, like we're just printing a record amount of money and that's what's causing inflation. They're like, no. It has to be, the facilitators of people trying to, achieve some level of sovereignty of having the ability to opt out in the first place. Has to be them. It can't be us. So again, I think that this is all predictable. I think, this is why this letter resonated with a lot of people, even if it turns out not to be real. So anyways, we have a lot to talk about today. Great show. First episode of the 5th Epoch, baby. I'm incredibly excited. And of course, who's also excited? It's in his name. They don't call him Optimus Fields for no reason. We got Nihilist Fields in the house. What's up, bro?
Well, I was going to give the horns for first episode of the new Epoch, but Nihilist Fields in the house, so got to give the horns. Man, I'm doing wonderful. I was telling our guest, and I'll bring him in 1 minute. I tried to sleep in this weekend or today, but I wasn't feeling good. My coffee ain't hitting as hard as it used to, so I need some stronger coffee out here. But it feels good. I get so excited when you come on the stream. It's like revitalizing. It's here we are. This is what we're meant to be doing, Nico. And then I want to touch on one thing, and I'll probably say this again when we cover this on the news. And I was telling our guests the same thing before we went live, that you can't even separate clown world from satire at this point because it's all clown world. Like, remember when the Babylon Bee was ridiculous, and now we are seeing the Babylon Bee literally become like
they're getting played out.
News story. They lost their edge, bro. Corporate press is doing a better job than the Babylon Bee out here. So, what a crazy, crazy time to be alive. And hey, man, we've entered the 5th Epoch. Or someone was saying it was epoch, but I like epoch.
Epoch sounds better.
It sounds better, right?
Maybe it's
because we're Latinos.
The epoch sounds epoch.
But man, it feels so good, and also like some cheap sats out there for everyone stacking sats. So man, it's going to be a great 4 years moving forward. And also, shouts out to that BMAG stream. That halving stream was actually very, very good. They did an incredible job. Even though they cut Nico and Jack Maulers off, I think everyone wanted to hear that conversation. And the funniest part is like Nico's, hey guys, come back here. Like, give me a minute.
I was like, bro, I felt bad for the guy. He was like, I teed him up with this great question. He was about to go into it. And I was like, hey guys, could you get it back? But anyways, so I saw someone mention Opti's taco feeder. So Sat from Lightning Goats, we have talked about this internally. It only feeds Nico, and we have to trust the host share. That's hilarious. But yes, so in regards to Opti's taco feeder, so we have talked about it. We have an idea in our heads of how we want it.
You can't even say your actual idea on air, Nico. This is a family-friendly show. Actually, this is a family-friendly restaurant.
It is a family-friendly idea, bro. Okay, so anyways, we also have a very special guest. Hey, we have Mitchell Hoddle. Mitchell Hoddle, you wrote the book, The Conservative Case for Bitcoin. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Published about 3 weeks ago on April 4th, and you can get your copy on Amazon for the wonderful price of $17.76.
Oh, okay.
Let's go.
You go to Amazon right now, you search The Conservative Case for Bitcoin, and it's you said it's live right now. When is it dropping?
Yeah, it's live right now. You can order your copy and it should be there within a day or two.
So why should people buy this book?
Because I grew up in the South. I know a ton of conservatives, and I've always tried to orange pill them, people like my dad or just people I grew up around that are, very right wing. And to me, Bitcoin is like very obvious from that worldview, but Bitcoin is very paradigm shifting, right? It's hard to sort of break out of like your pre-existing worldview necessarily. And so people, when they're going through, Barnes and Noble or whatever, and they're looking at books on the shelf, and they see the Bitcoin standard and they see the conservative case for Bitcoin, they're probably going to pick up the one that appeals to their pre-existing worldview, right? Now, I'm not saying my book is better than the Bitcoin standard. In fact, I would rather them read that, honestly, because that's like, it hits, Safety did a great job with that book, but people are going to pick up one that appeals to what they already believe. And so with my book, I really try to tailor the arguments and in the framing of Bitcoin in a lens that appeals to conservatives. So I appeal a lot to the core American values of property rights and freedom of speech. And, our rights don't come from government. They don't even come from the Constitution necessarily. They come from God. And I make a lot of cases in the book as why Bitcoin really fits with those core values of America.
100%. I would even go on a limb and I would say that the original, how the founders originally envisioned America wouldn't be possible unless it was on some type of sound money standard. I think that as long as there's a central entity, I think is the key word, that is able to just, create money out of thin air, you can make the argument that any country that has a central bank is 50% communist. We can make a really good argument for that. Starting off with the fire, it is Monday.
Wow, dropping the actual C word on YouTube. Sheesh. You can tell this is a new epoch. You can tell this is a new epoch.
Collectivist. I meant to say collectivist.
But wait, before we move on though, I do have to give a shout out to Mitchell as being a Bitcoin Zoomer. The Zoomers built different out here for real. Just love to see it. Bet for real. No cap.
We're taking over. We're standing on business. We're popping zins. We're here. You can't get rid of us.
Oh, that's good. This is going to be a great show.
Bro, man, the Zoomers dropping hot fire. Anyways, guys, if you're enjoying the show so far, hit the like button. We're at 60 likes. Help us break 100 likes within the first 20 minutes of the show. So if you guys are enjoying the content so far on Rumble, YouTube, or X, all you got to do is smash the like button. Anyways, before we jump into it, I do want to give a very, very extremely special shout out to the Bitcoin company that powers this show. And of course, I'm talking about Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well is the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. It's a publicly traded company coming out of Canada that recently expanded to all 50 states. It is a self-custody by default platform. What does that mean? That means that you can't buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well unless you're going to take self-custody, which perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. Because after all, the revolution is self-custody. All you got to do is head over to bitcoinwell.com, put in your email, sign up. It's very, very quick. It's 1% fee, nothing else. Fast account verification. I can confirm that. It's very, very quick. Only takes a couple of minutes. Freedom money looks good on you. Guys, you want to support self-custody platforms, right? Because self-custody is the revolution. You want to prepare yourself for that possibly inevitable 6102 order. Self-custody is the revolution. Go to bitcoinwell.com today. This is where I personally stack my Bitcoin. All right, everybody, let's get to numbers. We have a lot to talk about today. Let's check it out. Here we go.
The Bitcoin numbers.
Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Is your seed phrase really secure? Stamp Seed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them on paper. Don't store your generational wealth on paper. Paper is prone to water damage, fire damage. You want to put your generational wealth on one of the strongest metals on planet Earth, titanium. Your words are actually stamped into this metal plate with this hammer and these letter stamps. And once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamped seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They're also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin with peace of mind for the long haul. Stamp your seed on Stamp Seed. All right, guys, I made it incredibly easy for you guys. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now. It'll take you directly to the Stamp Seed website. Looks like the Clark Moody dashboard got an update for the halving. Look at this, Opti. Looks so clean.
Yeah,
so fresh.
I had to redo my favorites and stuff, but zoom in, dude. It's super small. Wow. I can't read that.
It is so clean now. Look at these beautiful numbers. All right, let's start with the Bitcoin price. 66,130 sats per dollar, 1,512. Market cap 1.3 trillion. All-time high price 73,770. Decline from an all-time high 10%. All-time high date, March 14, 2024. Days since all-time high. It's only been 39 days, but it feels like an eternity. The block height is 840,364. The chain size is 643 gigabytes. And the next, the target redate. No, it already happened, man. They haven't updated that. Anyways,
Nico, do how many blocks? Do how many blocks till the next halving?
The next halving estimate is March 19th, 2028. There's 209,636 blocks to the next halving. So it's quite a bit. It's quite a bit away. Anyways, I really like the redesign. Kind of caught me off guard a little bit. Looks pretty cool. Anyways, yes, guys. So current Bitcoin price is 66,110. So, anyways, I do want to talk about this, and I want to preface what we're going to talk about today with this quote from Frederick Bastiat. And shout out to Stacy Herbert, because she's the one that originally caught my eye to this quote. And I think it's a perfect representation of what's going on in today's America, right? And there's been a lot of events over the last five years or so that I think indicate this, right? You know, the continued acceleration of clown world, the continuing calls for censorship, the continued seizure, demonization of private property. And I think this quote perfectly summarizes why this is happening, why the elites or the people in power, the political class, are okay with this type of behavior. They're okay with this theft happening on a local level, with this theft happening on a large scale level. Why are they okay with this? And I think this quote perfectly summarizes it. So it goes on, quote, "When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time, they themselves create a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it." And I think that this video is a great representation of what that quote is talking about. And here you literally have politicians waving a foreign flag in the U.S. House of Representatives, celebrating sending another $60 billion to fund a foreign war. So they're celebrating sending money so that people can kill themselves. And this reminds me of the Ron Paul quote. "It's not a coincidence that the bloodiest century in human history was also the century of central banking." Fiat enables war. I would even go on to say fiat incentivizes war. Bitcoin defunds war. Bitcoin de-incentivizes war. It's a lot harder for politicians to fund a war when their only source of revenue is direct taxation. I don't think people would be okay with funding the war in Ukraine if they actually knew the cost of that war, if they actually knew that they were paying for it. Because when they print money, it isn't free. They're debasing the currency that you're working for. If you're an American or anywhere around the world, really, because everywhere around the world, that probably that your central bank in your country holds dollars. This is why they freaked the F out when El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, because they came to this inevitable conclusion that, holy cow, El Salvador has a shot of using an alternative of which we can't control. This is crazy. That's why they were so hell-bent on it. That's why the same House of Representatives opened an investigation into El Salvador because they made Bitcoin legal tender. Because Bitcoin is a clear and present danger to this system. What they're really celebrating is that they're going to make boatloads of money off funding another foreign war. This is why Julian Assange is still in jail. This is what it's about. Separate money and state, or this won't change. In fact, I'll say this, this not only won't change, this could lead to potential Armageddon, which is the scariest shit. So, when I say Bitcoin or slavery, this is slavery. This is war. This is nihilism. This is poverty. What is the alternative? This is ridiculous. This is disgusting. I can't even, when I saw this, I was so tired. I was like getting on a plane. My flight got delayed like 6 hours and I saw this and I was like, I usually don't tweet when I'm tired. I'm like, I just want to kind of, zoom out and like listen to like, just like the white noise music on your noise canceling headphones. And I saw this and I had to tweet it out. I was like, this is absolutely disgusting. And by the way, this is not a partisan issue. Because both Democrats and Republicans voted to pass this. So anyways. Now this leads me to another tweet. Here's Bob Burnett. Bob Burnett is the CEO and founder of Barefoot Mining. And here's Stephen Lucca. Stephen Lucca is a managing director at Swan Private. Anyways, I thought this was interesting. It says Stephen Lucca says the U.S. has officially voted to transfer frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. This is a major blow to the willingness of foreign countries to hold U.S. treasuries. Bob Burnett says this message, the message this sends to the world is horrible. This will come back to haunt the U.S., at least those that believe that the global reserve currency is a good thing for the U.S. The move will eventually recognize to be an inflection point in the downfall of the U.S. dollar. That's right. When politicians start politicizing the dollar, they start weaponizing the dollar for their own political means, I don't think things end very well. Anyways, this leads me to the apparent fake letter. A lot of people on Twitter are saying this is fake. Initially, it was going around that this was real, but it was very convincing. And take it with a grain of salt in terms of the authenticity of the letter. But I still believe it's a great warning. It's a great potential foreshadowing of what's to come. And I'll get to why I believe that is in a second. And the reason that this went viral in the first place was because it was so believable. Remember, Elizabeth Warren used a fake Wall Street Journal article to put pressure on the Treasury and to put pressure on the FinCEN to pass more hostile anti-Bitcoin regulation. She currently has a bill in the U.S. Senate, which 20 senators are supporting, which would be Pierre Richard's own words, VP of Research at Riot Mining, not my words. It would be a de facto ban on Bitcoin mining in the United States. So don't question the hostility of Senator Warren towards Bitcoin. And remember, this was Cynthia Lummis that said this at the Bitcoin Policy Institute Summit. Shout out David Zell and Bitcoin Mag for covering it. Cynthia Lummis said it herself, that there's politicians in DC that don't like Bitcoin because they cannot control it. They cannot control it. And what happens when a big portion of your population starts opting out of your political money? Well, then the party ends. Then they won't be waving Ukrainian flags in the Senate, right? And if you are to believe the theory from the sovereign individual, eventually over a long period of time, the internet and Bitcoin make politics irrelevant. What happens if you start to become too tyrannical against individuals and businesses? You start raising the tax rates through the roof. What happens? You're going to see a massive flight of people leave your country. We saw a glimpse of that when the pandemic was happening and there were certain types of laws that were passed. There was a huge migration of people from the states of California and New York to the states of Florida and Texas, which were more liberating, had more freedom, right? There's a reason that, people were going from East Berlin to West Berlin. They weren't going backwards. They were going towards the side of freedom. There's a reason as to why, Cubans, I live in Miami, I live in Florida. Cubans are willing to risk their lives, get themselves on a raft and, hopefully land in Florida in the search of freedom, right? I think humans naturally want freedom. And I think anyone who's an enemy of freedom is inherently an enemy of Bitcoin. But the beauty of Bitcoin is that it exposes incentives. So over time, if you're a tyrannical government or if you're a dictator and you don't want your people to be free, eventually you're going to go after Bitcoin, right? So it's like, you know, the canary in the coal mine type of thing. Anyways, I do want to read you this this letter because, again, I think it's a foreshadowing. I think it's a warning. But just to be clear for everyone, this letter has not been verified. Anyways, it goes on to say, this is an apparent letter that was written April 21st, 2024, from Elizabeth Warren to President Joe Biden. It says, I am writing to introduce the Cryptocurrency Reporting and Wealth Tax Act, a legislative proposal aimed at addressing the challenges posed by the growing use of cryptocurrency assets and addressing wealth inequality in our country. As you are well aware, the rise of cryptocurrencies has presented both opportunities and challenges for our financial system. While these digital assets offer innovative solutions and investment opportunities, they also present significant regulatory and tax enforcement challenges. As such, it is imperative that we establish clear guidelines and reporting requirements to ensure transparency and accountability in the use of cryptocurrencies. Under the proposed legislation, individuals, trusts, and entities holding cryptocurrency assets with a value exceeding $1,000 would be required to report such holdings to the IRS annually. This reporting requirement aims to provide the IRS with the necessary information to effectively monitor and enforce tax compliance in the cryptocurrency space. Furthermore, the bill proposes the imposition of a 1% wealth tax on cryptocurrency holdings exceeding $500,000 for individuals, trusts, and entities. The wealth tax is intended to address the growing wealth inequality in our country by ensuring that those who hold significant wealth in the form of cryptocurrencies contribute their fair share to support vital public services and investments. I firmly believe that this legislation strikes the right balance between fostering innovation in the cryptocurrency space and ensuring that our tax system remains fair and equitable for all Americans. By implementing mandatory reporting requirements and a modest wealth tax on large cryptocurrency holdings, we can ensure that our tax system remains responsive to the changing nature of wealth and income in the digital age. I urge you to support the Cryptocurrency Reporting and Wealth Tax Act and join me in addressing these critical issues facing our financial system and economy. Thank you for your attention on this matter, and I look forward to your support. Now, I just want to mention that Elizabeth Warren is spelt wrong here. Senator Elizabeth Warren. So even if this letter is not true, even if it turned out to be bogus, I think part of the reason that it was so popular is because this is something that I think we're already starting to hear inklings of, right? We've already heard Janet Yellen talk about a proposed wealth tax on the very wealthy. You heard AOC talk about this. In Canada, they just changed the capital law, the income, I'm forgetting the word. Holy cow. The capital gains law. They increased the tax rate from 50% to 67%. So you take all the risk and the government takes 67% of the gain after it's above a certain threshold. Like, that is absolutely bonkers. And let's point out some things that are true, right? Here is the U.S. individual income tax return form of 2023. And take a look at what's at the very top. Under filing status, it literally starts with digital assets. At any time during 2023, did you sell digital assets? Yes or no? It literally starts with that, right? So again, is it too inconceivable? Is it too difficult to believe that we won't have politicians introducing some type of BS like that so that they can keep partying like this? Is that too inconceivable? I don't think so. Anyways, so I do want to read part of this because I think it really kind of nails where I think we're going. In the new millennium, cyber money controlled by private markets will supersede fiat money issued by governments. The authors have also predicted that with the rise of this new cyberspace and consequently cyber money, it will become harder for a nation state to collect taxes from its citizens. They compare the state to a farmer keeping cows in a field to be milked, but that, quote, soon the cows will have wings. They predict that the government, to collect taxes from its citizens in this type of society, it would have to violate human rights. Even traditionally civil countries will have to resort and turn nasty. Lacking their accustomed scope to tax and inflate, governments even in traditionally civil countries will turn nasty. Businesses that offer services that facilitate the realization of autonomy by individuals will be subject to infiltration, sabotage, and disruption, arbitrary forfeiture of property, already commonplace in the United States where it occurs 5,000 times a week, will become even more pervasive. Governments will violate human rights, censor the free flow of information, sabotage useful technologies, and more. I mean, does that sound familiar to you? Here is Alex Gladstein posting a screenshot of the American Pravda, the New York Times, and the name of the article is "Government Surveillance Keeps Us Safe." Right? This is, you've heard these types of headlines from the New York Times before. You've heard there is no inflation. Actually, inflation is good for you. This is the same New York Times that the intelligence agencies used in the 2000s to convince the American public that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction that led to the Iraq War. This is the same New York Times that attacked Bitcoin mining and doctored a picture to make it look like the skies over a Bitcoin mine were somehow polluted. Even though Bitcoin miners emit no emissions, they literally just emit hot air, right? So this is the same New York Times. Government surveillance keeps us safe. I don't think this is a coincidence that this type of article was released, after the FISA law was passed, right? Allowing the continued surveillance of U.S. citizens circumventing the Fourth Amendment, right? So anyways, interesting to say the least. Now, let's talk about the national deficit, something that we love to talk about on Simply Bitcoin, right? And you always hear politicians talk about, their fair share and taxing and wealth inequality. And we always hear about these things, right? It's like a continuing theme that we always hear. Well, here's the reality, okay? The U.S. government spent $6.13 trillion in 2023. They only collected $4.4 trillion in tax revenue. They spent $1.7 trillion. That's more than the GDP of more countries. Just to kind of give you an idea, the GDP of El Salvador is $32 billion. The U.S. spent $1.7 trillion more than it collected in tax revenue. So when politicians talk about taxation and they talk about this, the U.S. government doesn't have a tax revenue problem. It has a massive spending problem. And this has consequences. This is borrowing from your children's future. If they're not on a Bitcoin standard, if they are on a Bitcoin standard, okay. But yeah, you want to know why things are getting heated? You want to know why the political atmosphere is the way it is? This is why. And there are consequences to this. I love referencing this site. It's called What the F Happened in 1971. And you'll start to notice a pattern as I go down these graphs. In 1971, compared to today, the compensation went from 90.84%. It rose to 115%, even though productivity increased 246%. It's almost as if compensation stayed the same. Again, real median weekly earnings of full-time workers. It's basically stayed the same since 1971. Why has housing become so expensive? Remember housing prices? Maybe some of you guys are too young, but it was a lot easier to buy a house back then. Income gains widely shared in early post-war decades, but not since then. The 95th percentile all the way up, the 20th percentile kind of going sideways. And you have to ask yourself why. Well, I mentioned it in the very beginning of the show, because every time they print money, it's a wealth redistribution mechanism from the lower and middle classes that don't have the means to save in assets to the people that do have the means to save in assets and back to the government. That is the real scam that is happening. Income growth, bottom 90% of earners, sideways. Top 1% of earners, upwards. Share of gross domestic income, relentless 50-year decline in wages, share of the economy's total income. Income share of top 1% relative to the bottom 90%. And it just keeps going. If you guys want to find out more, go to What the F Happened in 1971. So, okay, all of that being said, right, because we covered a lot of things here. When you have politicians celebrating people killing themselves, funding war, funding churn, funding younger people fighting, right? That's what they're celebrating. But at the same time, you have people having drug issues on the street. You have people that can't afford housing. Something is wrong. Something is really, really wrong. And what can you do? What can you do? Because you can watch this and you're like, okay, I don't know. I don't know how to, maybe I don't have faith in the elections. Maybe I don't see things changing. Well, there is something that you can do as an individual. Buy Bitcoin, earn Bitcoin, mine Bitcoin, put that Bitcoin into self-custody. If enough of us do it, we will win. We will actually effectuate change peacefully. We will actually change the system without any type of violence or coercion. It's like a forcing function. And if they don't want to go away, if they don't want to go along with it, the people that do have Bitcoin, you know what we do? We get up and leave to a place that does. Simply Bitcoin, live from El Salvador. It's like that. But you have to empower yourself. You have to become a sovereign individual. How do you become a sovereign individual? Do your own research. Number one, do your own research. Go on Nostr, go on Twitter. Form your own thoughts. Stop relying on a third party to force feed you information. And number two, use your own money. Use a money that another man can't just create out of thin air. Use a money that a man cannot just confiscate at the flick of a switch. Become a sovereign individual. And if enough people become sovereign individuals, if enough people stop depending on a government that has failed them time and time again, on a government that has sent them to their deaths many times throughout the last century, I think things are going to change. But what is the definition of insanity? I forget. Trying the same thing and expecting different results, right? I think if we keep heading down that path, I don't like the future. I don't like the way it looks right now. And that's why I'm choosing to opt out entirely. That's why I'm choosing to say, you know what? Enough's enough. You guys can have fun waving your little fake, flags and celebrating, a churn house, basically. I know what I want for my children. It's definitely none of that. You guys could keep that. I'm okay with it. Anyways, I want to get your guys' takes on this. I'm going to start with the Zoomer because you know what? I'm a little bit upset about all of this, and I'm a millennial, man. But you have a little bit. You have like a decade or two of more life than I do because you're significantly younger than I am. So how do you feel about this, man? What were your reaction when you see politicians cheering another foreign war that has absolutely no net benefit to your life whatsoever?
Well, Nico, you were just spitting there. Hats off to you. You really hit a lot of great points. To me, it gets my blood boiling a little bit. There's zero reason any politician should be waving a flag other than the American flag on the Senate floor. Absolutely no reason. And the American Revolution, the infamous Boston Tea Party event where they threw the tea in the harbor as a form of protest, that happened over a 3% tea tax. And when you look at taxes today, right, you've got basically a 7% inflation tax because the money supply grows at about 7% per year. You've got income tax. You've got capital gains tax if you're trying to hide from inflation and scarce assets. You've got property tax. You've got sales tax. You have all these different forms of taxes. And we're just like not doing anything about it, right? And to me, like voting isn't the solution. You have to vote with your wallet, right? You have to vote with your capital. If you hold treasury bonds, you're voting for these foreign wars, right? You're saying, hey, you can borrow some of my capital to fund a war in Ukraine or to, do all these government programs that are wasteful and just destroying the average American's purchasing power, right? Or you can hold Bitcoin and you're saying, no, I vote for something else. I vote for real property rights. I vote for individual sovereignty. And so where you put your money is the type of world you're going to create. And so like you sort of wrapped up at the end of your speech there, we all have to vote for Bitcoin, right? We have to put our capital in this new system. This isn't a hopeless problem, right? If Bitcoin didn't exist, I would be very concerned for my future. But because Bitcoin does exist, I know I can opt out as an individual. And if we get enough of us to see this pattern, see the orange light, so to speak, then we can opt out as an entire society and really kind of turn the ship around.
100%. I completely agree with that. We can opt out as an entire society in a peaceful way, right? I think that's the key. That's why we call it the peaceful Bitcoin revolution. Non-kinetic, just people opting out and saying, listen, guys, you guys want to play, that political BS? You guys want to fund, wars? You guys want to do that? That's cool. You guys can keep that. We'll be over here. Right. Anyways, Opti, what's your take on all this, brother?
Yeah. Before I rant, though, Nico, I do want to circle back. You said something that was a good joke there that might have gone over people's heads. You said the American Pravda. Will you explain that for the people that don't know what you're saying?
Yeah,
I know what you're saying, but I want to elaborate on that for the people that don't know what you're saying.
So I was referencing the New York Times, right? I think over the last 5 to 10 years, especially guys, we played the video for you guys last week. I can't emphasize enough watching this interview between Tucker Carlson and Mike Pence. But it basically has been coming out over the last 5 to 10 years, really, is that a lot of these legacy media institutions are nothing more than propaganda arms for the national security state, right? Not 100%, but they do function like that in the way. And essentially what social media did is that it had mass peer-to-peer communications, right? So it becomes very difficult for governments to control mass narratives now. Right? If you have millions upon millions of individuals talking peer to peer, like we're doing right now, we're talking directly to you guys, it becomes very difficult to kind of control the mass narrative, to knock on a handful of institutions and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't run that story. It makes us look bad. Anyways, that being said, Pravda was the official state newspaper of the USSR, of the Soviet Union. Now, what's really interesting is that clearly it was a propaganda paper, right? But if you translate Pravda from English to from Russian to English, it stands for truth, right? So the state propaganda newspaper of the Soviet Union, of the USSR, was literally called Truth, right? And it kind of reminds me of the saying, right? History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. I think, if the Soviets saw what the current media industrial complex is like and their ability to control the narrative on a massive scale was like, man, they'd be salivating at the mouth. I think the current media industrial complex puts the Soviet propaganda machine to shame. Anyways, Opti, what's your take?
Yeah, I love it. I felt like that point should be stressed a little more. Okay, so rolling back to the whole bit, look, I am no fan of money printing. This is why I'm a Bitcoiner in the first place, but I'm even less of a fan for printing money and giving it to foreign nations. And all those people in Congress waving those Ukraine flags, like, in my opinion, and I'm gonna say it out here, like, it is what it is. They're all absolute traitors. They're selling Americans out for foreign profits, for whatever the hell they're doing over there, literally just being warmongers. Shouts out to Pedro, though. He said something on Twitter. It was like, can we call a group of politicians warmongers now? This is a warmongers of politicians or something like that. But man, the fact that they're doing this, pushing the Ukraine thing late at night over a weekend, and also doing a push for the FISA bill late at night over the weekend, just continues to show that the politicians are doing shady stuff out here, and they don't want people to know exactly what they're doing. Of course, they're going to cover this in some feel-good story. We're bad Russia's bad. We must stop them, or whatever. We got to stop fake news on the internet. We must clamp down on your freedoms. It's all double speak. It's all ways to take more and more liberties away from people, because they understand what we understand. If they can control the narrative, if they can psyop and brainwash the population out there, they can basically get away with everything. And they've been getting away with everything for a long, long time. And that Bastiat quote is so great. I've been saying it for a while, that we are well into a time in a crumbling empire where the politicians are no longer working for the citizens, but actively working against the citizens and trying to rob the coffers as quickly as possible. I think we are hitting those first stages, and this is only going to continue and get worse and worse and worse as, it seems like the politicians and the central banks and the bureaucrats out there are actively trying to destroy America. And, Nico always jokes about us leaving America, but I'm a staunch, there's nowhere else to run. For better or worse, if America falls, there's nowhere else to go. We need to ensure that these politicians out here do not destroy the last bastion of freedom, which is America. And then, of course, on top of that, The whole Elizabeth Warren thing, yeah, it came out to be, I think, fake news. It was a leak, but it's very interesting that maybe if it did come out as like an official leak, it's one of those Hegelian dialectics, just like kind of push out this, see how the people respond to it. Or shouts out to the troll that made this, because again, the Babylon Bee is damn near irrelevant now because the propaganda wings out there are doing their job. Like, that is where we are right now, where you can't even separate quote unquote official news stories coming out from quote unquote official institutions and clear satire. That's how insane clown world has become. You can't tell what's real and what's fake anymore. And I think this is obviously by design. I'm reminded of, and Nico, you can correct me, of the clip, but I think it was Yuri Bezmenov clip where he's a KGB officer, and he basically said, just give me about 3 generations and we will psyop you into believing whatever we want to. And Nico mentioned it. If the USSR, if the media apparatus that was a part of the USSR looked at the USSA, they would be absolutely applauding, because they did an absolutely incredible job at psyoping every single person and literally having the average person work against their own best incentives. And this is why us Bitcoiners call bullshit every single day, by taking our value, our profits, our savings outside of the system and buying as much Bitcoin as possible, because this only works because, one, people still believe in the institutions, and two, any amount of capital, any amount of labor that you keep in the fiat system just continues to perpetuate that system. And that's why all of us Bitcoiners opt out. We're just sitting here like, man, you guys are all absolutely crazy. You are actively working against your own best interests, and all you really have to do is just take out your time, take out your value, take out of your labor, out of the fiat system, and it will crumble upon itself. We are at that point now where all politics is hollow, where anyone that is a bootlicker for the state is making cover for literally stealing from you and your family. And if this doesn't get you angry, I don't know what will. You're completely brainwashed, psyoped, and asleep at the wheel. But it's becoming very clear that it seems like America has become a banana republic. And it's amazing to me that people still trust these institutions, that people still look at the politicians and like, yeah, man, he's an expert. He knows what he's doing. He's out here working for my best interests. Like, the brainwashing is real. And it's just incredible that more people aren't waking up at this moment. But I think slowly but surely they are waking up, because everyone is seeing the cracks in the system and they're like, what the hell is actually going on? Like, you don't even know who the good guys are anymore. It was very clear for a long time in America, like, what side was quote unquote the good guys. And now it's like, oh my God, like, they're both evil? Wait, every side is wrong? Wait, everyone is trying to steal from me? What is going on here? So I think this is obviously in the theme of the show, Simply Bitcoin. This is all good for Bitcoin, but hey, it might get dark before it gets better. And this is why we tell everyone to buckle down, make sure you're fit mentally, physically, make sure your Bitcoin's in cold storage, make sure you are protecting yourself and your family and building local communities, because you cannot trust the federal government to protect you at this point. They are actively working to hurt you and your best interests.
100%. I mean, like, again, and this might be a little bit outside the Overton window, the way that Opti phrased it, but if you kind of just break it down in a very simplistic way, right? And I'm trying to be as inclusive as possible. Look, printing money is theft. Printing money is stealing, period, full stop. Like, they print money, they're debasing your purchasing power. And money does not have to function like that. Right. If they're telling you that it does, they're lying to you for their benefit. And that's just a fact. That's an undeniable fact. Whatever your political beliefs are, whether you're on the left or you're right, it doesn't matter. Right. Lower middle classes, you guys get affected the most by this system, because the lower middle classes are the ones that save and earn in fiat. And your currency is being debased so that those politicians could wave their flags. Right? That's what it's about, which is absolutely nuts and it's disgusting. But this is what the peaceful Bitcoin revolution is all about. It's about standing up and saying enough is enough. I don't want to partake in that anymore. Anyways, there's about 1,500 of you guys watching live on YouTube and X, and about another 80 of you guys watching live on Rumble. If you guys are enjoying the show, make sure to smash that like button. Really, really helps with the algos. All right, everybody, let's get to news. We have a lot to talk about.
The Daily News.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation Devices. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US. It's fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a simple feature phone. So you will know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes. Experience the peace of mind that comes with taking ownership of your own keys. After a massive sellout during Bitcoin Miami 2023, the Passport is back in stock at foundationdevices.com. Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, completely air-gapped security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. If you're thinking about getting your Bitcoin off exchanges, this is the one for you. Check out the Passport link in the show notes below to learn more. Everybody, I do want to give a shout out to Passport by Foundation Devices. You guys got to get yourself a hardware wallet. Remember, guys, not your keys, not your cheese. You want to become sovereign individuals. You want to take self-custody of your wealth. And one of the ways that you do that is by taking self-custody. Get yourself a hardware wallet. If you pair up the Passport with the Envoy app, it's incredibly easy to use your cold storage Bitcoin. I can't emphasize that enough. Guys, you can scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. Get yourself a Passport by Foundation Devices Bitcoin hardware wallet. Quick ETF update. The BlackRock ETF almost has as much Bitcoin as the Grayscale Bitcoin ETF. The Grayscale Bitcoin ETF has 304,000 Bitcoin. The BlackRock ETF has 273,000. The Fidelity ETF has 152,000 Bitcoin. So it seems like BlackRock's going to overtake it. But yeah, I mean, it seems to have been going a little bit more sideways lately. Seems like we are chopping sideways, which in my opinion is better if we just kept going up and to the right, like parabolically. I think that would concern me a little bit. But anyways, in other news, I did run into this post, and I think it's a great kind of like, it's a great kind of testament to not only Odell's quote, which is stay humble, stack sats, but also Vikingo's quote, which is stay solvent, right? I think it's important to dollar cost average. I think it's important to stay humble. I think it's important to not trade, or you might wreck yourself. And here's a great kind of story of that posted on Reddit. Because I used to have 20 Bitcoin, and I only have one. It's killing me on the inside. Just need to get this off my chest. I had a good job that paid well. And before discovering BTC, I basically put all my savings into stocks in 2011. Once I Googled what is Bitcoin, I immediately sold all the stocks and went all in 2017 around 5K. That's a pretty good price. I continued to put my entire earnings into BTC throughout the terrible bear markets. I even shorted BTC with BTC on BitMEX the day it crashed from 7K to 3.5K. And that was probably my best trade ever, which just gave me more BTC. I then got very lucky, got a job that paid in BTC, hold it as much as I could, stacking up 20 BTC eventually. It's a lot nowadays. Fast forward to now, and I only have one. It's because I sold some holdings to buy a house after it dropped from 70K to 35K, and I have been renovating it myself. That was my full-time job. It ended up costing me so much more, and I was not working causing me to sell far more BTC than I anticipated. My ex-wife sued me, and I had to spend more BTC on that too. Previously, I also zero debt. Now I have 40K on credit card debt. And even though I got my well-paying job back, I am right on track. It's really eating at me as well. I thought I was rich in the last bull run. How stupid that was. I should have kept working and never spent a single Satoshi. Don't ever spend your BTC. Do whatever the hell you have to do to live within your means and keep earning fiat. Do not make my mistake. I think that's a really, really good point, ladies and gentlemen, which is the whole idea of stay humble, stack sats. And the stay humble part is key there, right? Because I think what tends to happen every bull market is you start to see at your net worth in dollar terms, okay? This is a key word. And you're like, holy cow. But that's the problem. because you shouldn't be looking at your net worth in dollar terms. The dollar's constantly devaluing. You know how you should look at your net worth? In Bitcoin terms. And you should always strive to have more Bitcoin than the day before. If you're doing that, you're doing it correctly. If you're not doing that, you're doing it incorrectly. So that's something to keep in mind. Internalize that, because I've heard this story a lot more than I wish. I've heard it a lot from a lot of people, and it makes me sad every single time. Because 20 BTC, this coming around, let's say, throwing darts on a wall. Don't take this as speculative. Don't take this as investing advice or anything. But let's say we hit 100K, right? That 20 BTC is $2 million, right? And now let's say the next epoch, we hit 500K, 250K, right? You guys get this. You guys get the general gist of it. It's life changing for a lot of people, that type of wealth, right? So I think this is a good warning, so to speak. And when I saw it, I felt you guys would find it valuable. Anyways, I had Jeff Booth on my show last week, and Jeff has a way of describing, so many things. And you guys watch this episode, go to Jeff Booth, Simply Bitcoin IRL, latest one. It was last week. He blew my mind multiple times throughout the entire episode. And one of the things that I asked him is, are we late? And his response was absolutely incredible. I'll play it for you guys and then we'll talk about it.
Oh, it's fascinating. So Jeff, you said something there that caught my eye, which is this idea that we are early.
Do you believe that? Of course you believe that, but we're sitting at Bitcoin at 61,000 right now. A lot of people still choose to,
keep in mind, just before you do that, say 61,000 pieces of US paper. Right. Bitcoin is repricing the world. All houses, all energy prices, everything is being repriced into this. And again, if you want to price it in your piece of paper, and I think that's one of the constructs that most people are converting it to their pieces of paper to measure prices.
Okay. This is fascinating. So let's say someone wanted to make it's just, okay, so you adopt a Bitcoin standard, but you start looking at prices in Bitcoin terms. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
That's what I'm saying. And once you start to do that, you see all prices will fall forever because the thing that we never had before is something where we could allow the free market to work. So we lived in something that was telling us that it was the free market, and a lot of people believe that. And on both sides of the ledger, it isn't a free market when money is manipulated. So it just says who gets more of the stolen money that comes from the same people that are giving that more strength. And remember, most people are measuring inflation by, first, they spend all their time on the inflation rate that people are talking about is constantly manipulated. So it's not the real inflation rate. And that is true too. But they don't even capture that it shouldn't be measured from zero. It should be measured by the natural productivity of the free market, which I would estimate today is about 5% per year. And that means next year it'll go faster. And the year after it'll go faster because technology is exponential. That means if you did nothing in Bitcoin but hold it, then you're going to get exponentially richer over time just by the free market. But it's the only thing that can measure it. And ironically, the rise of debt and the rise of manipulated markets and then control and war is exactly as a result, is a byproduct of trying to stop deflation, because deflation makes debt more expensive and you can't repay it. But if you're inside that system of debt that's already long past insolvent and would get insolvent in a nanosecond if you allowed deflation, if you're inside that measuring from your world, it feels like everybody's dividing and it's getting worse, and you're taking a side and you believe in your side and you're giving it more strength. Let's imagine you march down the street and you roll over cars and you light things on fire, then you go home to sleep and all the windows are fixed in the morning and your streets are clean. Where did the money come from? It came from you. And and I don't think people realize how much their power, they're just getting all of these things within the system. It's sucking their time and energy, and their lives are getting worse by trying to play prisoner's dilemma within a system that must steal from everybody.
So much. He mentioned how they had the necessity for war to stop deflation. He mentioned the fact that, you know, this printing, this taking sides, you know, and you break things in the protests. It's like, but we're all paying for that. Now, after hearing that speech from Jeff, how does this make you feel? And for our audio listeners, I'm once again replaying the video of the politicians waving, you know, the Ukrainian flag, basically celebrating that they're sending another $60 billion, of which we clearly don't have, to fund a foreign war. It's a totally different conversation. Now, Jeff said something also very interesting, which is life gets exponentially cheaper on a Bitcoin standard. Don't trust, verify, right? You guys know that I love this website, Prices in Bitcoin 21. The US dollar has gotten 91% cheaper. Oil, 92% cheaper. Gold, 91% cheaper. The S&P 500, 86% cheaper. A house in the US, 86% cheaper on a 5-year scale. All of those things if you've been living on a Bitcoin standard, right? So even with Clown World, even with all these like things that you could make the argument for aren't necessarily all that nice, if you've been living on a Bitcoin standard and you've been taking that Bitcoin into self-custody and you're the sole owner of those keys, even with everything happening around you, you can be living in this type of, you know, oasis in a way, with all these things, right? These things getting more expensive around you. It doesn't apply to you, right? You can be on the life raft, kind of like walking. You see that meme of the people fighting and then you're that guy in the back? Yeah, that's you. If you're on a Bitcoin standard, just kind of like watching and just listening. Anyways, guys, if you want to listen to the entire episode, which I highly recommend, go search Jeff Booth, Simply Bitcoin IRL. It's the latest one, because he absolutely blew my mind. And he just kept dropping fire like that for a whole hour. Anyways, I want to pass it on to the young Zoomer first, and then we'll get Opti's opinion.
Yeah, so Jeff Booth's thing is this clip you just played. It reminds me that we do not live in a free market economy, right? We have capitalism. You know, we can privately own capital and the means of production, but it's not free markets. The government is intervening in literally every aspect. And the central bank is a central planner for the most important industry in the economy, which is money itself and the price of money. If we were completely hands off and allowed the free market to operate in the money industry as it does in every other industry, prices would go down forever, as they do when you look through the lens of Bitcoin. And it would be so obvious to people if you saw this in any other industry, right? If you had central planners determining the price of this laptop or this microphone or cars or houses, everybody would be like, hey, this is messed up. Like, why are we centrally planning this? Let's let the free market cook. But we don't see that with money. And people have been brainwashed into thinking that money stems from government. It's something that cannot exist any other way, when in reality, money arises naturally in any society that wants to trade. And Bitcoin is just the latest example of that. We want a way to trade peer-to-peer digitally without any third party, right? We want a way to store the fruits of our labor over time without it being debased or without it being confiscated because you're a political dissident. So Bitcoin is just this free market money that has emerged, and anybody can put themselves on a Bitcoin standard today. I see a lot of people talk about Bitcoin standard in the hypothetical as if it's something that's going to exist in the future, when it already exists today. I live on a Bitcoin standard. I don't hold dollars. Life has gotten so much cheaper for me over the last year. And I think anybody who wants to not suffer, right, who wants to like not have a struggle financially in their lifetime, they need to switch to a Bitcoin standard, especially, you know, viewing things through the lens of a Zoomer, which I am. I have no idea how I would be able to buy a house if I was on the fiat standard, right? I have no idea what I would do for retirement. How am I going to start a family? These are so many questions I would have no answer to if it wasn't for Bitcoin.
100%, 100%. Opti, quick, and then we'll move on to the culture.
Yeah, well, first off, Bitcoin Zoomer is built different, like for real, no cap. All right. Anyways, I want to touch on that little the screen grab in the beginning, because I had a handful of friends that wrecked themselves during this bull market or bear market of the last couple of years because they didn't stay humble and stack sats. They in hindsight realized they messed up. And the saving grace for me is just I listen to that meme of just stay humble, stack sats, just work your fiat job, live below your means, save as much Bitcoin as possible, and continue to provide as much value as possible, and just take that Bitcoin in the cold storage. Like I have so many friends that are ardent Bitcoiners that just got a little greedy. They thought the Bitcoin was going to go to 100K. They started to make, a little riskier bets, and they absolutely wrecked themselves. And now they are kind of in the same position as that guy, just like beating their head against a brick wall. And like, man, like I now need to rebuild my stack. And, it hurts. It hurts to watch your friends get wrecked. And, my heart goes out to that guy, but I mean, he still has one Bitcoin. So as long as he continues to stack, he'll be good to go. But again, guys, when we go into the next leg of this bull market, which we think will be the end of the year, you got to remember the stay humble, stack sats meme, and not necessarily stay humble as like, don't be, flamboyant or whatever, but like stay humble in your finances. Just accumulate Bitcoin. This is why I always say the name of the game is Hungry Hippo with Bitcoin. Accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. As Nico always says, the most important number is the amount of sats that are under your control. And then on the next point, I absolutely love that IRL Jeff Booth. I love Jeff Booth's perspective. He did great presentation at Madeira, Bitcoin Atlantis. But man, I love saying the same thing. It's like, what are we going to do with our Bitcoin? We're going to trade our Bitcoin for these political paper money? Like, no, it's a one-way street once you understand Bitcoin. Once you really understand what Bitcoin's about, you're not going back into the fiat system. You're only touching the fiat system as much as you need to survive in the current moment. But once you understand the fraud that is a fiat system, you're not going back to paper money. This is what it is, guys. The dollars that you slave away for every single day, the ones you break your back for, the ones you are so hell-bent on acquiring, it literally has no value. It's literally a piece of paper. But hey, this is why it's fiat money in the first place. It's by decree. It only works because the guys with guns tell you to take this for your service and your labor. So I really love how Jeff Booth is able to frame this, because he's a little, he's a little calmer when he talks about this stuff. I always sound a little hyperbolic and like I'm a crazy guy, but that's what it is. It's all political paper money. And once you understand Bitcoin, you're never going back to the fiat system. So this is what we try to tell you guys constantly every single day, is that once you understand Bitcoin, once you're all in on Bitcoin like me and Mitchell are, and Nico and every one of us watching the show, you're never going back to the fiat system. You're only touching the fiat system as much as you need to get your groceries and pay your rent and your bills and all that to survive. But you're never going to go back. Like, we're not here to exchange our Bitcoin for 100 million pieces of paper. That's not how this works. We don't care about the dollars. We care about the purchasing power going up. And that's what this is all about, is making sure that you aren't getting debased and you aren't getting poorer. Anyways, let's get into the culture, because I do want to talk to Mitchell, Nickel.
Amen. All right, before we do that, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor. And of course, I'm talking about the Orange Pill app. Stack friends who stack sats. Join the 10,000 Bitcoiners that are on the Orange Pill app. Build up your Bitcoin Rolodex. The next 5 to 10 years, Bitcoiners are going to be some of the most powerful, influential people on planet Earth. So it's probably a good idea to stack friends who stack sats. The Orange Pill app has a clever filtration system so that when you interact with anybody on the Orange Pill app, they're Bitcoiners, right? You're not going to interact with any altcoiners on there, or any people that are going to tell you that, if you send them one Bitcoin, they'll send you two. It's also the #1 resource for creating Bitcoin only events. If you move to a new city, you can open up the Orange Pill app and it'll tell you the Bitcoiners that are around you geographically. So it's probably a good idea to download the Orange Pill app. Also, Simply Bitcoin has its own group in there. You could join it. Check the link in the video description and or the podcast description, and you can interact with me and Opti. We try to be as active on there as much as possible. Download the Orange Pill app. Stack friends who stack sats. All right, everybody, let's get to the culture.
The Daily Culture.
right, everybody. I want to give a shout out to our other sponsor, Kaboom, the most trusted place to buy, sell, and host mining equipment. You can check out their racks by scanning the QR code or checking the link in the video description. It will take you directly to their Telegram marketplace where you can connect with a member of their sales team. They make purchasing their products easy and transparent. You could also sell your mining equipment with them, access their vast network of domestic and international customers when you sell your mining equipment with Kaboom Racks. What are you waiting for? Visit Kaboom Racks today, the most trusted place to buy, sell, and host mining equipment. Check out their racks, Kaboom Racks. All right, Opti, and the Bitcoin Zoomer. What are we talking about?
Yeah, man. So before we get into your book, Mitchell, I think it's befitting to start with your Bitcoin journey. I mean, you're a Zoomer. You absolutely get the problem going on in the world. You're able to explain this very well. So let's just start with the beginning. How'd you get into Bitcoin, and why are you such an ardent Bitcoin believer?
Yeah, I got into Bitcoin right at the end of 2020. So I had been studying economics in school. I was in college at the time, and I understood that inflation was not a great thing, right? But, you know, it's just 2% a year, so it's not a big deal, whatever. They say you need to stimulate the economy, whatever. And then in March 2020, they did all of this money printing, all of this stimulus. And I had, you know, studied about Zimbabwe and Venezuela and all these places where hyperinflation had happened. And so I knew inflation was going to be a problem. And throughout the entire year of 2020, I don't think we really need a reminder of all the details of what went on there, but I lost a lot of trust in our systems, right? Certain events took place, you know, there's censorship online. I had a lot of questions about our incumbent power systems, and I didn't trust any of them. And so when Bitcoin starts to go on its bull run at the end of the year in Q4, it goes from 10K to 20K in about 6 weeks. I started paying attention to it. And once I found out it had a 21 million supply cap and that the government cannot control it in any sense, then I was hooked. And so from the beginning of 2021 through the bull market, I really started learning about Bitcoin as much as I possibly could. I dabbled in shitcoins for about 6 months before it actually clicked that, hey, Bitcoin's the only legitimate thing here. And since then, I've just been taking the orange Kool-Aid nonstop. And we kind of alluded to it earlier, but like, there's no turning back, right? I've never met someone who was a Bitcoiner and no longer is. You're on this path and you see things completely differently now. And so my life has increased like in quality so much since I got into Bitcoin. It's not even just, you know, my finances are more in order, but Bitcoin kind of, it changes your mindset, really does lower your time preference. And I started taking care of my body and my mind and my spirit a lot more since I got into Bitcoin. So my life is just drastically better now than it was 3 years ago. And Bitcoin has played a large part of that.
100%.
Absolutely love it.
And like what you're mentioning, sorry to cut you off, Opti, and pass it back to you. But the whole aspect of, you know, your life has dramatically improved on a Bitcoin standard is this common theme that I keep hearing over and over and over and over again. And I want you guys to connect the dots between every block that we've done this. I'm not going to call them segments anymore. They're called blocks now. Boom.
Ooh.
But every block that we did on today's show, I want you guys to connect the dots in between, because there's a stark contrast between the two worlds. There's a stark contrast between the fiat world and there's a stark contrast between the Bitcoin world. And you as an individual have to decide what world you want to live in. And Mitchell's a great representation of, it doesn't matter how young you are, right? You can transition to a Bitcoin standard today. You could do it right now. You could take agency, you could take action over your own life, and you can make that transition. Opti?
All right, great. Well, before we get into the book and the thesis of the book, I want to ask you just a very simple question. You are a Zoomer. I'm sure you still talk to Zoomer normies out there. So what does the Zoomer think about Bitcoin?
They don't. They do not think about it at all, at least in the current environment, right? During the bull market, you get a lot of inbound requests, as I call them, inbound orange pill requests. Oh, I'm known as the Bitcoin guy, so people will come to me with their questions. Now that I have a book, I can just send them there. But before, you know, I'd be typing out these paragraphs, trying to explain it to them. But I don't waste my time doing that anymore. And it really takes, like, when I think about me getting orange pilled, right? Nobody orange pilled me. I orange pilled myself. There's an abundance of resources out there. if you have curiosity, you can find the answers to the questions you have. But most of the people my age, they're too short-term focused, right? They're just thinking about partying, or what are they, what's going on this weekend? Who's hooking up with who? How am I going to pay back my student loans? Like, I got to make rent this week. I got to work 60 hours and do overtime and all this stuff. So people aren't taking the time to really understand Bitcoin, because you're not going to get it upon your first glance. You're not going to study Bitcoin for 5 minutes and just magically get it. It's going to take a little bit of effort. And that's something that I don't see a lot from my peers, but I also don't necessarily think Bitcoin is this like age gap generational thing. Like, I've met a lot of people in Bitcoin from all different generations, right? I think the common denominator among Bitcoiners is simply curiosity. And you can have that curiosity if you're young or if you're old. So I try to like reach out to people and teach them about Bitcoin, but it's going to take effort from people on an individual basis, right? You can bring the horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah, totally.
I love the
Totally.
It's like the Zoomers. No one cares.
All right. Let's pivot a little bit. So, Mitchell, glad to have you on our side. Fucking young kid, killing it, smart, gets it. And you wrote a book. It's on Amazon, and everyone in the chat's mentioning the price. Shouts out to the price, $17.76. But for those, I mean, it might seem, I don't know, like it might seem a little too obvious. Like, why does there need to be a conservative case for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I almost, in a way, regret titling it that instead of the American case for Bitcoin.
Ooh.
The goal of this book for me is I wanted to create a resource that could really appeal to people that love America, right? And I'll preface this by saying Bitcoin doesn't need America. Bitcoin will survive anyways. Bitcoin wins regardless, right? If America becomes super hostile to Bitcoin, Elizabeth Warren becomes our dictator, Bitcoin's banned, all Bitcoiners are getting hung, us three, we're going to El Salvador, right? We're going somewhere else. We're taking our capital with us, because it's literally, you could store it in your head. But what I want, like, I love America. I'm a diehard patriot. I would not want to live in any other country unless I absolutely had to. I want to orange pill our country, all right? I want America to be the place for Bitcoin. And you mentioned this earlier, Opti, like America is the last bastion of freedom, right? If this goes down, there's really not anywhere else. And I want America to be that home for Bitcoin. And there's just this tremendous crossover between the founding principles of America and sort of the ethos of Bitcoin. A lot of the founding fathers, they themselves would have been Bitcoiners. And you saw there on the back of the book, I put that Thomas Jefferson quote. And really where I think this starts, and I make this point in my book, is it's at the individual level, right? So what's going on in Washington? They're waving the Ukrainian flag. The people in DC, they're kind of gone, right? It's almost a lost cause at this point, but it's not a lost cause in your town, in your county, in your state, right? Orange pill your mayor, orange pill the people in your neighborhood, orange pill your governor. The thing that makes America awesome and what has really allowed it to thrive over the past 250 plus years is that it's decentralized, just like Bitcoin, right? We have 50 states. If you don't like your state, go to another state. Make your state the most orange state in the union. I see a lot of America doomer mentality out there. But if El Salvador, the murder capital of the world, can get on a Bitcoin standard and turn things around, so can Los Angeles, so can New York, so can all these cities that people are saying are shitholes nowadays, right? Bitcoin can turn any society around. Sound money can really fix things. And all the incentives that are tied into sound money as well, right? So that's a huge point I wanted to get into in my book, is that America is decentralized just like Bitcoin. So orange pill your local community, and let's really try to make America the home for Bitcoin. I don't want it to be somewhere else. I love America.
Love it. All right, Mitchell. One thing, and it's going to be a tangent, but I do want to get like your TLDR on the thesis of this book after. But one thing I've noticed as well, like I came to Bitcoin basically apolitical. I never really fell into the left or the right paradigm. But the more we come onto the show and the more we cover this stuff, the more I realize that the right or the conservatives, they're so afraid of talking about money. And we're always just like, it's always about the money, guys. So what would be your, I don't know, counter to a conservative out there that doesn't realize what is going on and they're so afraid of talking about the money? Or also, have you noticed this yourself?
Yeah. And I got a section in the book on this. It's like a huge thing in conservatism is personal responsibility. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps. But that personal responsibility gets thrown out the window when it comes to money, right? They outsource their retirement strategy to Social Security or, a financial planner. Nobody's actually taking ownership of where their assets and their accumulated capital goes. And then another point kind of on this is one of my favorite charts. I put it in the book. It's on WTFhappened1971.com that we were looking at earlier, is the U.S. national debt by the incumbent party in the White House and in Congress. And it doesn't matter, red or blue, it just goes straight up. And a point I make in the very beginning of the book is that the modern day Republican Party, they are not conservative, not in any sense of the word, right? That bill to give $60 billion more to Ukraine, bipartisan, right? Bipartisan used to sound like a good thing. It's, both sides are getting along, but now it's just both sides are screwing us, right? And so the fiscal spending has not been conservative, even in the quote unquote conservative side, right? The Republican Party. And so if you really want to limit government spending, you have to take away the money printer. There's no other way around it. The taxes, the revenue is not going to pay for the spending, right? And so they print the difference. And if you want to actually take an actionable step to limit government spending rather than just sort of complaining about it, then you have to adopt the hard money standard and handcuff the government's ability to finance like all this unfruitful stuff, war and wasteful government programs.
Love it, man. The youth are going to be okay. Love this kid. All right. So Mitchell, if someone watched this and they're still on the fence, or rather, what is your 2-minute elevator pitch for the conservative case for Bitcoin?
One is property rights. So America was founded on, rights that come from government, or sorry, they don't come from government. They don't come from the Constitution. They come from God. And Bitcoin gives you that. There's nobody that can dilute your share of the Bitcoin network, and you can hold that wealth in a way that it can't be confiscated, even with violence. So one is property rights. Two is energy markets. Okay. Conservatives are very pro energy and energy production, and Bitcoin mining specifically incentivizes the mass production of energy. So the ESG proponents like Elizabeth Warren, they've come after oil and gas, those industries, and they've come after, they call people on the right, you hate the environment, right? Whatever. You want to see the world burn, you want to boil the oceans. They've also come after Bitcoin miners. So there's a tremendous room for coalition there to sort of combat anti-energy legislation. And the third thing I would say is the nuclear family, right? So we've seen a deterioration of the nuclear family over the past few decades. And part of it is, maybe feminism and culture and stuff like that. But really the primary sort of dagger there is fiat money. It's a lot harder to provide for a family on a single income. And there's all these government programs too that sort of incentivize having children out of wedlock. And if you can adopt a hard money standard, one, you can turn inflation into tailwinds, right? It'll actually increase the purchasing power of your Bitcoin and lead to more Bitcoin adoption when the currency is getting debased. And two, you're handcuffing the government's ability to finance these disincentivized programs, that sort of corrupt the nuclear family in a way. And we've seen that break off since 1971. And so property rights, energy, and nuclear family, I would say, are the three sort of main values that Bitcoin aligns with conservatism.
Love it. Love it. And I love the meme you just said, turn inflation into tailwinds. Like, I really love that framing. That's great, man. Bitcoin Zoomers out here winning. Absolutely love it. We did get a question in the chat though, Mitchell. You guys can get this book on Amazon. $17.76 is the price, but they're wondering, will you turn this into a digital version?
Yes, absolutely. I'll get it as a digital version, an ebook, and then hopefully down the line get it translated in all sorts of different languages. But for now, it's just paperback.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. All right, Nico, you want to chime in, or last two sats? Mitchell, what's the last message you want to leave with the audience?
It's not red versus blue. It's orange versus green. And I want to turn as many reds into Team Orange as I can. And definitely Orange Pill, your local community. That's where it starts. Get your butcher on a Bitcoin standard, right? Get your hair cutter on a Bitcoin standard. Get the auto mechanic down the road on a Bitcoin standard. That's really how we're going to make this change.
100%.
Love it, man. Love it.
Yeah, man. And I gotta say, I am, the Zoom. We got Zoomers in the Simply Bitcoin crew, and the Zoomers that we have,
they built different for real.
You guys are, I thought the millennials were, were hardcore just because of 2008 and whatever, but the Zoomers take that up a notch. And I just think that it's because of the times. I think it's because of like if the millennials had some inkling of an opportunity to buy a house and live the American dream, I think the Zoomer generation that's gone completely, right? And I think it sort of becomes this kind of like situation where you see in developing countries where they adopt Bitcoin out of necessity. And I think the Zoomer generation, for you guys, right, it's like, it really is like Bitcoin or serfdom, Bitcoin or slavery. Like there really is no opportunity. I think millennials at least had an opportunity to get the gig at Goldman Sachs or, JP or something like that. And, perhaps you can be part of that 1% of the 1% of the millennial generation that has enough to get ahead. But the Zoomers, man, you guys got it rougher than we did. And, but the fact that you have the maturity and wisdom to kind of really look at it at such a young age really does give me hope for the future. And I wonder how much of that has to do with you adopting a Bitcoin standard. I wonder how much that has changed your thinking and kind of your life philosophy as well. So, yeah, man. Well, thank you for joining us.
Wait, Nico. Sorry, one more question. I don't mean to cut you off. Mitchell, what would be your elevator pitch to another Zoomer about Bitcoin?
Prices go down forever. If you buy Bitcoin, that Lambo and that beach house you want will actually become affordable. Otherwise, you're just rowing against a current. So adopt Bitcoin or have fun staying poor. Choose rich, right? Bitcoin is choosing rich.
Oh my
Love
God.
it.
Oh my God. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was our show. If you guys enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Smash the like button. Consider subscribing. Follow our guest at Mitchell Hodl. Go check out his book. It's for sale right now on Amazon. I'm your host, Nico. It's my legendary co-host, Opti, who interrupted me even after I thought he was
I'm going to
done.
interrupt you one more time. Mitchell, where do you want to push people? What do you want?
Mitchell, where do you want to push people,
Just
bro?
cut them off. At Mitchell Hodl on Twitter. Follow me there, and you can find my book, The Conservative Case for Bitcoin, on Amazon. I appreciate you guys letting me come on here and cook. This was enjoyable.
Well, I really appreciate it. And dude, you absolutely crushed it. And you give me hope for the younger generations, man. It's absolutely inspiring. Your worldview and how much you're on the ball, you're on point at such a young age, right? So anyways, guys, that was our show. Love you all. We'll see you tomorrow. Brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live. Peace out, everybody.
This episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, on a mission to enable independence.